right, and I will now, hold on just a second. Okay. Oops. Am I screen sharing? Yeah, just a thumbs up. Yep, okay, so you can see my big PowerPoint slide there. Yeah, is that good? Okay, let me, okay, hold on just a second. Sorry, everybody, just getting things adjusted here. No one panic. All right, let's do this. Okay, I think we are good. All right, so people can hear me, I assume. Yes, good. Yep, good. People are answering. Nice. Thank you for answering, folks. Good. We are recording, and so I think we can start. Sorry about the delay. So I'm Professor Rosenblum. I'll be your teacher this summer for Psych 49. And this is, hopefully you've had a nice summer so far, and you'll continue to have a nice summer despite taking a college class, if this is your first class of the summer. This should be a very straightforward course for most of you. This is a course for non-majors generally, so we try not to make it too technical. We want to make it fun and interesting and engaging. That's how I see the point of the course. Of course, it is over a 5-week period, so it does go by pretty quickly, and you know, we'll have to deal with midterms pretty early and all that sort of thing, but we'll try to make this as easy as possible for you. So if you're looking on that first slide there, you're seeing that has all the information about me and the course. There's my office, but I'm not going to be there too much this summer. It's better to contact me through email. And if you have a bunch of questions, we can meet by appointment for office hours. We'll do it over Zoom. That being said, I encourage you to take advantage of your wonderful TAs that we have this quarter, Danielle and Serena. You'll meet them tomorrow, and you'll learn a little bit about what the discussion sections are and then how they can help you through the course, the TAs. Let's see. The course your course grade is just based on 2 things. It's based on a midterm and a final, and they'll each count more or less the same. Basically, what we do is we add up all the questions at the very end and see what your percentage is and how you've done relative to the rest of the class. They're probably about 60 questions. There might be a few more on the final exam. So it might count a tiny bit more, but there'll be about 60 questions on each exam. Your first exam will come during week 3. Your final exam, the last exam, will be during your finals period that weekend. They're all multiple choice questions. Because it is an online class, I do this as an open book online exam. You can use your notes, you can use the book, you can use the lectures, all that sort of thing. However, it is a timed exam. I can't remember how long you get. I think you get 2 hours for this. And you do have to study. We'll talk more about that as the exam comes in. If you think that since it's an open book exam that you won't need to study, that is wrong. There's no way you'll be able to look up all the answers during the exam. You have to study. And then, of course, you'll have a chance to check your answers that you're a little uncertain of. But it's not one of those. It's not one of those exams that you can come in unprepared for. I allow you to take it during a 2-day period when you feel like you're ready for it. You just take it online and take it within the 2-hour period, and you'll be done with it. Neither the second exam is not cumulative; it's just based on the second half of the material. But both exams, excuse me, are based on the lecture material, the book, and the discussion section material. So let's talk about that just a tiny bit. So the lecture material is going to be based on the book, but there is some new material in the lectures that I'll be discussing, mostly research that has come out since the book was written in 2009, 2010. And there's a bunch of it. So we will be discussing, oh, there's our garbage trucks. You hear that in the background. Sorry about that. I'll let that finish. That's what we get from teaching from the garage. Yeah, so I'm not in Hawaii as it looks like. I just thought that'd be a nice background to put up so it can be a little bit cooler than where you folks probably are right now. Anyway, I am in my garage. So it will be based on, the lectures will be based on the book, but go beyond the book. But in addition to that, the book will cover things I just don't have time to cover in lecture. Okay. In addition to that, the discussion sections will go beyond the book and the lecture. So it's important that you go to those discussion sections and take notes, and it should be pretty clear to you what material in the discussion section you should concentrate on when you're studying for the test. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the book. I did not order the book for the bookstore because it's way more expensive than getting it online. This is a book I wrote in 2010, and you can get on Amazon. I think for, I don't know, you can get it used for like $3 or something like that, or you can get there's also an online or a software version of it you can get for your reading device, and there's also an audiobook version if you're not getting enough of my voice in class. It's my voice on the audiobook. And your test isn't for another couple of weeks. So if you order the book today, you'll certainly get it in time. No terrific hurry. There's no problem. I just wanted to make sure you were able to get it as inexpensively as possible. So you will need it because, again, there will be material in the book that's not covered in class. So it's important to get it. But if you get it, even early next week, you should be absolutely fine. It'll be very clear if you look at the syllabus how the book follows the lectures. I mean, I'm basically using the book outline to go through the lectures as we go through the course. So there should be no surprises there. But again, you'll see material in the book that's not covered in the class and the lectures and vice versa. And in addition to that, there is discussion material that's not covered on either. Okay, let me take a couple of seconds here and answer your questions about how the course will work. Let's see what we got here. Oh, shoot. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. All right, there you go. Is that better?
Perfect, thanks.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. Oh, yeah, we'll get this done. And so can you see? All right, hold on a second. I was able to do this fine last time. Let me do this. All right. Let me do that. Okay, now on this. Nobody panic. All right. Okay. Why can't I see my chat? Hold on a second. That's very strange. Okay. I want you to be able to see me. If I put this in the slide, can you now see me and the slide? Somebody? Can you see what I mean by me is the live video? Yes, good. Thank you, Wendy and Diana. So you can see my live video and the full slide, correct? Because that's what I'm after here. All right, perfect, perfect. All right, we will figure this out as we go through. Great. Can you still see the slide in me? That's still looking fine? Yeah, yes, good, thank you. All right. Are there any questions about the class? Any questions about how the tests will work, or the how we do the grading, what the material is going to be based on, that sort of thing? Yes. So somebody asked, do you recommend you get the book? I absolutely do. It is, I mean, for all intents and purposes, we'll call it required, because there will be material in the book that I won't be able to cover in my lectures, so it's important that you have access to the book. There is not a PDF for the book. So you'll have to get it, I guess, somehow through. You know what I could do though? How about this? I can't just give you the book. I can't just give you a PDF of the book, but I'll give you the PDF. I can post a PDF of the first chapter. So those of you that want to start reading right away before the book arrives, you will have access to the first chapter. Okay. There's some questions about the discussion section, and I guess it's not active, but it will be late. It'll be active today or tomorrow morning, Daniel says. Thank you for that. Okay, what else do we have here? So I will post a PDF of chapter 1 of the book, just so you can make sure you can start reading ahead of time. Other questions about the exams, about the content of the course, anything like that? If you have things later on, you can chime in. You know, feel free, by the way, in terms of the format of the class, feel free to either speak up if you'd like, or you can raise your hand, or you can put a question in chat. You know, I'll check them every few minutes, so we can interact that way. Now, I forgot to mention this, but the course is recorded. I will be posting the lectures sometime in the afternoon after the lecture. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it is true. You don't have to attend the 9 a.m. lectures. They will be recorded. However, I recommend that if you can, that you do attend the live lecture. People tend to do better in the class when they're attending a live lecture, even if it's online like this. And it's unclear why, but it seems that students are more engaged when they come to the lecture live. There's research on this, even if it's online. You know, there's a lot of distractions when you're watching a recorded lecture. You know, both my sons are currently in college, and they tell me the same thing, that they always seem more engaged in the class if they actually come to the lecture. Even if the lecture is online, if it's live, it actually helps them. In fact, you know, I've taught this class many times online since COVID, and I could potentially just put those lectures up and say, hey, there's your class, but I don't like doing that. I actually like re-lecturing live, because I think it makes a difference. I think people learn more, they do better on the exams. Also, I assure you, and I can't predict why this is going to happen, but every quarter, at least one of the lecture recordings will not work. Now, I don't know why that is. It typically happens sometime in the middle and sometimes in the beginning. So there's not much I can do about that. So, I am recording the lecture as kind of a public service, but I can't ensure all the lectures will be recorded. Okay, so I do encourage you to come to class if you can. All right, questions about that? Questions about the recorded lectures? I'll put a link. It's going to be on YouTube probably. I'll put a link as soon as I put the first one up. Okay. All right. Well, I'm assuming people can still hear me even though there's no questions. You can give me a little thumb up or something like that just to let me know that you're there. You're there. Oopsie. What's going on? Okay. Yep, thumb up. Okay, thank you, Henry. I appreciate that. Hold on a second. Yeah. Oh, I see. So if I do that, everyone sees everything. All right. All right. Okay. Still a little confusing to me, but we'll get it. Okay. So let me know if there's anything wrong with any of the screens. Oh, there's a has enabled closed captioning. Oh yeah, it's fine. Closed captioning is fine. I guess that works pretty well. So you can see the subtitles below if that helps. It's fine with me. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So what this course is about, and what the book is about, is understanding perceptual skills that we don't know we have. That's kind of why I've decided to call it perceptual superpowers, because we've long known that there are many things that get into the brain that we don't have conscious access to, right? You've heard the term subliminal perception, that sort of thing. And yes, that's very true. We can only consciously attend to a relatively small stream of the information a little bit at a time. But there's other information that's getting in. We'll talk about the idea of subliminal perception and whether those other things can truly have a large effect on your behavior and your decisions and things like that. I'll tell you this much, don't worry about it. It's not very much to be worried about with coercion or something like that. However, you are getting information, perceptual information, through sensory channels that you're unaware of having. And that's what we're going to be exploring in this class. We're going to be exploring these things through meeting some individuals who, for either personal reasons or professional reasons, have actually learned to access these hidden skills and learn to fine-tune them. You'll see what I mean by that in just a second. And so that's going to be the fun part. When I was writing the book, I interviewed, I can't remember, about 50 people who, for either professional reasons or their own personal reasons, have learned to fine-tune perceptual skills that we don't know very much about personally, right? And that was wonderful. I really enjoyed talking to those people, and that's going to be one of the fun parts of the class, is learning about these people, meeting these people virtually and understanding how they've fine-tuned those skills and what their situation has been like. But we're also, going to be learning some hard science on this too. So the first idea, though, is that you're perceiving much more than you realize. And what I like to call these skills are implicit perceptual abilities. And all that means is that, implicit means that, in this case, that we're not very aware of having these abilities. And they kind of occur without our explicit awareness. So I'm calling them implicit perceptual abilities. And these are going to be skills that you'll see are shared with animals. And so some of these skills we've known animals have had. The one I'll be talking about first is how bats echolocate. We'll learn very quickly that we echolocate too. And there'll be a lot of those sort of examples. If you have a doggy, that it uses its sense of smell to navigate as it goes on its little walk. I walked my dog this morning, and if it were up to my dog, he'd smell his way around the neighborhood. It'd probably take him hours and hours and hours to see who's been around, what other dogs have been around. And they're scent tracking. The truth is, you can do this too, and we'll learn in what ways your body, your nose, and your brain allows you to do these sorts of things. And as I said, we're then going to learn about how many of these skills can be enhanced. And that's where we'll meet individuals who have, for various reasons, learned to enhance these skills. So we'll learn something from an expert echolocator. Some of these experts, might seem somewhat familiar to you. So we're going to learn something from master chefs. We're going to learn something from individuals who've learned to refine their ability to taste different components of wine. Computer animators who maybe look at faces a little bit differently from how we look at faces, that sort of thing. And in theory, these are things you could learn to enhance too if you were interested, and probably have already done so based on your various hobbies, based on your if you have some background in athletics, you've probably improved perceptual skills to some degree, and they can be improved in really, really impressive ways, as we'll learn. So we will be talking to perceptual experts. But as I said, this is a science class, and we're going to use the opportunity of learning about these perceptual skills, about these expert perceptual skills, to learn something about the brain, because these skills really do exemplify some of the most exciting discoveries in perceptual science, perceptual psychology, and neuroscience. And some of these things you probably learned a little bit about in other classes, maybe in high school, maybe in college. For example, the idea of neuroplasticity. When I was in college, we thought the brain, could develop and change when we were children. But once we hit adulthood, I think, they told us maybe by the time we hit college, the brain wasn't going to change too much. They warned us, hey, don't overindulge on the weekends because you're killing your brain cells, and your brain, can't change. So you're not making your cognitive skills, your intelligence any better by having too much fun at parties, if you know what I mean. And we know that's not true now, that the brain continues to change and can actually develop new connections and, in fact, new brain cells as we go through adulthood. And this neuroplasticity, this change that the brain can go through even in old age, can be facilitated by learning new perceptual skills. We'll learn a lot about that as we go through the quarter. Then we'll learn about a concept called mirror systems. And really what this has to do with, more than anything, is the fact that we imitate each other all the time. Now, this is not the sort of imitation you used to do with your siblings to annoy them. I have two sons, and they were little, they were a year and a half apart, so you could imagine what that meant as, when they were in the back of the car when they were 7, 8 years old, right? They would imitate each other to annoy each other. We're not talking about that type of imitation or the type of impressions that you might see on Saturday Night Live or something. We're talking about very subtle, kind of inadvertent or unintentional sort of imitation that goes on when two people talk to each other. Either they're imitating their body language a little bit or imitating their speech inflections a little bit. It's something that happens automatically with the brain. And then we'll learn about that. This turns out to be a very important component, because these imitations not only happen kind of unintentionally, they actually serve some interesting purposes. One has to do with actually enhancing the social connection between people as they interact. We'll learn that the more that they're able to imitate each other, the more they're able to actually improve the rapport between each other. Okay? But this imitation actually has even more fundamental sorts of influences. It turns out that when we're imitating, it actually fine-tunes our ability to perceive each other on a very fundamental level. Okay, on a very fundamental level. Here's a good one, just to kind of whet your appetite on this. We're always imitating each other's facial expressions, even if it's not obvious. So when you look at me smile, okay, there I am smiling. Believe it or not, the muscles, okay, in your face change just a tiny bit reflexively. Now, you might not have smiled back like I did, okay, but your muscles for your smile were engaged just a little bit. And we've learned, okay, research has taught us that in fact, that improves your ability to perceive other people's expressions. Your unintentional imitation of a smile helps you perceive facial expressions to the extent that if we inhibit your expressions a little bit, and there's various ways of doing that, it will slightly inhibit your ability to see other people's facial expressions. One of my favorite examples of this is with whatchamacallit, Botox. That's it. I don't remember. Botox. Maybe you've had Botox. You're kind of young to use Botox. Maybe your family, somebody in your family has. I have. I live in Los Angeles, and here I have a number of friends that have used Botox to, kind of make them look younger. You might know that involves kind of injections into the muscles, and yes, it does inhibit. The way it works is it inhibits those muscles from moving, and that makes the wrinkles look less pronounced. But not only does it do that to the person's face who gets Botox, that person who's gotten Botox will have a little trouble discriminating some very finely distinguished facial expressions in other people, because their ability to imitate, to spontaneously imitate a person's expressions has been decreased a little bit, has been inhibited. Now, don't get me wrong. I have a very close friend. My wife and I have a very close friend that, I told her this when we were out to dinner, and she said, I have no problem distinguishing expressions in people. And sure, that for the most part, that's true. But if she were put in an experiment and she was looking at faces that were very subtly either smiling or frowning, very subtly distinct, she'd have trouble doing that to a small degree. Yeah, it's small, but it is systematic, which is interesting that it even affects it all. Okay. Somebody asks, is it true that mirror neurons fire in the same way our neurons fire to complete actual actions? I never understood why we don't constantly imitate each other's if that's in that case. That's a great, great question, Diana. It's a great question, Diana. And we will be addressing that. Okay, so yes, mirror neurons do fire in the same way, often, depending on what we're watching, but there's more in a motor action than just in the mirror neurons. And so the mirror neurons might fire, but what comes after that, okay, might not fire in the same way. And in other words, won't have us inducing the same type. It's a great question, Diana, and it is something that we will absolutely be addressing later on in the quarter. Okay, cool. And then finally, the final thing I wanted to talk about that is going to be an important neuroscience kind of scientific component of the course is multisensory primacy. And so, 15 years ago, even while, you folks were in kindergarten or preschool or whatever, our view of the brain was very different. You may have heard of this, that we have a part of the brain that's, involved in seeing, a part of the brain involved in hearing and touch and all this stuff, and different components in the brain were responsible for different senses, and they were pretty separate, these different parts. We have a visual cortex, an auditory cortex, that sort of thing. Well, we now know that that kind of map on the brain probably isn't that correct, because we know that the visual cortex can be activated by what we hear in the auditory part of our brain. The auditory cortex can be activated by what we see. And actually, those sort of cross-sensory mappings, going from eyes to ear brain, and ears to eye brain, and all that stuff, is happening all the time and is an important component. In fact, we now know that the brain really is designed around multi-sensory input. So towards the end of the book, you'll see I say that in some ways the book is a lie, because the way I organize the book, the way I'm organizing the class, is by sensory system, we'll start off with hearing and then go through smell and taste and touch and all that. That's how the chapters are divided up. But that shouldn't give the impression that the senses work alone in that way. They're always influencing each other, and you'll get that idea as we go through it. And so, if you take an intro course or perceptual psychology course, you'll learn about the senses that way. But it's a convenient way to teach about perception, but in some ways it's not a very, thorough way, and it's not a very precise way to teach about the senses. The senses are always influencing each other, and we'll see some very, very important aspects of that as we go on. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do now is give you kind of an introduction to each section and chapter of the book, just to kind of get you interested, so you don't drop out on the first day. The first thing we're going to talk about is what I call hearing silent objects. Just going to adjust this a little bit. Okay, hearing silent objects. Cool. What I mean by this is that typically when I ask you what you hear, somebody would answer, oh, I hear sounds. I hear things that make sounds. I hear music. I hear voices. I hear garbage trucks, cars, closing doors, dogs barking, all the things I'm hearing right now. Right? I hear things that make sound. However, you're also hearing things that structure sound, that reflect sound. And that aspect of hearing is possibly as important as hearing things that are actually creating sound, emanating sound. Okay. And you'll hear from some specialists who will absolutely convince you of this, right? So these are people that work on film, that work on TV, that do the sound editing and sound recording, and boy, do they care about this stuff. Yes, they care about getting a good recording of the dialogue and adding sound effects and all that sort of stuff, but they also care equally as much about how they can capture the reflections of a room, so that the room that the film is depicting, okay, sounds like it looks. I just went back to the theater. Maybe some of you did this. Maybe you saw Barbieheimer or something like that. So I couldn't get into Barbieheimer, right? Even the non 70 millimeter and non IMAX versions of Oppenheimer were all sold out here in Los Angeles. So we went to go see Mission Impossible. My wife and I saw Mission Impossible on Saturday night, which is the first time I think we've been in a theater for 5 years or so. Not like we were scared, but we didn't really think there was worth seeing anything in the theater. And I was reminded about how good theater sound is. There were speakers all around us, and of course it captures the really crazy sound effects and everything that are in that movie, in the Mission Impossible movie. But it also captures The speaker systems in theaters will capture the reflections of the sets and rooms and locations that the scenes are taking place in. We'll talk about that in some detail. But I'm first going to introduce you to hearing sound reflections by telling you about a friend of mine, Daniel Kish. And here's Daniel right here. Daniel Kish, you'll be interested to know, was a UCR undergraduate. He got his undergraduate degree here and then got his master's degree at San Bernardino in rehabilitation. Daniel lost his vision when he was less than a year old. In fact, he believes he had no vision when he was born. I'll tell you about that when we go through it. But Daniel is somebody who can mountain bike, and I went mountain biking with him, as you'll learn. Teach blind people to mountain bike, teach blind people to go on hikes. And the way he does this, the way he's able to mountain bike, is through echolocation, right? So I mentioned this a little bit. Bats, you probably know, marine animals as well, send out a signal. The signal hits a target, in this case, a bug. The sound reflections come back to the bat, and the bat knows what's out there. Okay? So the bat can tell what's in front of it, what's on the side, based on sonar system, basically. But you may not know that people can do this as well, like Daniel Kish and a number of other blind people. In fact, probably most blind people are doing this to some degree, even if they aren't aware of doing it. Daniel now is aware of it, and he's learned to fine-tune it. Here's one of our perceiving experts. But you'll also learn, and you'll learn about this tomorrow in some detail, this isn't something that just the blind do. It is something we all can do. And this is an experiment we did many years ago, where we took people out in between, I believe that's now the biology building. It was near where the old psychology building was. But this is on campus, this picture you're now seeing. And we took the freshmen, intro psychology students, taught them a little bit about what echolocation is, and had them then echolocate. In their case, they were saying things like, hello, hello, testing 1, 2, whatever they felt most comfortable. Dan, by the way, Daniel Kish, clicks with his tongue to send the signal out. You'll learn about that. But we had our freshmen do this. They didn't feel comfortable clicking. They would say, hello, testing, and we'd have them walk to a wall and stop before they got there, just based on echolocating. All of our subjects, every single one of them, no matter how goofy, how self-conscious they felt, could all do it successfully within 10 minutes of practicing. They all were able to stop, to walk to the board and stop before they got there, which is pretty amazing. You'll learn more about that probably later today, in fact. Okay, so we can say this. You can use sound like a bat. You can hear space, and you'll learn about those details when we discuss the folks that do sound recording and sound engineering for movies and TV shows. You'll learn also from them that you can hear where you are in a room based on sound reflections, and that you can hear not just your location, your changing location, but you can also tell something pretty specific about the type of thing that's reflecting sound or obstructing sound. So you're going to learn about being able to determine the shape of something, of an object that actually covers up a sound, that's blocking a sound, that exists between you and a sound. And this is something, again, that sound effects people know a lot about and have to incorporate that fact into their creation of sound effects for movies. Okay. Then we'll go to the second chapter on sound and talk about things that make sound. So this is the chapter where we'll actually talk about things that make sound, and you'll learn some really interesting things that you probably didn't know about yourself or know about the auditory system in general. You'll learn that you're very good at anticipating approaching sound sources. And here you're seeing a very, very interesting example of that. you're seeing an individual who's blind. He's wearing a blindfold, and everybody in this sport, beep softball, beep baseball, wear blindfolds regardless of whether they're blind or not. We'll talk about why. This is a sport that blind individuals play. It's a team sport that's similar to softball, but is based on a ball that emits a sound and bases that emit different sounds. And they learn to hit the ball, okay, based on the beeping that the ball makes, and also to I got a little video here to show you, but I want to make sure the sound is working. Hold on just a second. I'm going to stop sharing just for a second. No one panic. All right. Screen share. Share sound. Good. Optimized for video clip. I'm glad I remembered to do this. Where did I go? So now you can't see me. What the heck? So I'm gone now. How did that happen? Oh boy. Sorry, everybody. Why can't I see me? Can you guys see me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can see you.
Oh, you still can see me? Okay, I couldn't see me. Okay, good. All right, you can see me talking. So everything's the way it was? I apologize. Sorry about that. It's been a while since I taught online. Yes, you can see me. Yes. Good. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for giving me feedback. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Good. Hopefully everything's working. If not, let me know if it's not. Okay, so I'm going to show you the video of them actually playing. Is there sound?
Full speed in the darkness, 100 feet toward a buzzing target. It's at first, if you're doing it for the first time, there's a lot of fear involved.
Willing to sacrifice your body and potentially get hit with a ball that's coming at you at a decent speed.
Okay, could you folks hear it okay? I'll play it again later when we go through that in detail, but just, were people able to hear the video? Just want to make sure. Anybody?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll learn about how that's done. But what I mean by this is that our brains, certainly these folks, but everybody's brain is especially good at perceiving approaching sound sources that are coming towards us or we are coming towards. And it's going to be an interesting fact because this is something that the automobile industry has been very concerned about, especially because of the number of hybrid and electric cars that are coming out. It's been very clear that these don't make the same type of sounds that combustion engine cars do, and it's caused some problems, which has kind of forced the government to actually ask companies to put a tiny bit of a sound on these cars. But the fortunate thing is the sound doesn't need to be very loud because our brains are really nicely tuned to approaching sound sources. Our brains are especially attuned to sounds that are getting louder. Yeah, Danielle says that, yeah, electric cars scare me for this reason. Yeah, I think we all do that, get a little scared. My street here in Los Angeles, I think there's probably an electric or hybrid car in every driveway up here. And I'm very aware of the fact that a lot of these cars now have little sounds. that are added to it. And the sound doesn't need to be loud because our brains are really good at picking this up. So what I say in the book is that we hear the future, that we're especially good at being able to, our brains are able to predict when a sound source will be at our position. So we know when it will be to us before it actually is. So in that sense, we hear the future. Then you'll learn in section probably tomorrow that you can hear the shape of things based on when they are struck or ringing. Some really interesting research on that. And then we'll spend some time talking about music. And this is one of my favorite topics. I'm a musician myself. And we'll be teaching a psychology of music course this coming year, if you're interested. And so we'll spend a lot of time talking about the fact that even if you're not trained as a musician, even if you've never taken a music class, if you're a music listener, your brain has to some degree become an expert at hearing subtleties in music that you probably didn't know you were hearing. You're a much more sophisticated listener than you're aware of, okay? Especially when it comes to what music means, the emotion of music. And yes, I mean, the lyrics are important. I'm sure you listen to the lyrics, but the way the lyrics match the melody, the way the lyrics match the what we call harmonic structure, the chords of the song, are things that you are acutely aware of. Whether you're listening to classical music or pop music. I listen to tons of pop music. My son's going to see Taylor Swift at SoFi. I don't know if any of you folks are doing that. Him and his girlfriend are going to go. They're very excited. This is going to be these things that we're going to learn about, the deep structure, the meaning of music, are going to apply to all of those situations. I think you'll find that really fun and interesting. Okay, then we'll move on to smell. And you'll learn that you smell like a dog. And this is something I've already mentioned a little bit of, right? The fact that, like our dogs, we can learn to do some scent tracking if we want to. And there you're seeing a student. We usually do this in our class. Unfortunately, it's because it's a remote class. We're not going to be able to do it, but we usually take our students in this class outside, and this is in front of the psychology building. We lay a rope down into the grass. That the rope is soaked in peppermint oil. We ask students to put on a blindfold and a set of earmuffs and gloves so they can't feel the rope. And we have them follow the rope like it's a maze just by smelling. And they can absolutely do that. You'll learn that you're able to do that partly because you have two nostrils. So, having two ears allows us to hear where a sound is coming from. Having two eyes allows us to see or helps us see in depth in 3 dimensions. Having two nostrils allows us to determine the location of a smell. And then we'll learn that we can do a lot more with smell that I think you'll find super interesting. We're going to talk about a whole series of experiments that have been done with t-shirts, asking individuals to wear a t-shirt overnight, and then asking whether their friends can recognize who's been wearing that t-shirt based on the natural smell. Now you're thinking, oh, this is going to be gross. But it's not really. I mean, it's not based on sweat smells. It's just based on, how you wake up in the morning, if you've been wearing a t-shirt overnight, you take a sniff of your t-shirt and say, oh, yeah, it smells like I've worn it, but it's not BO or anything like that. It's that type of thing. And you'll be absolutely amazed at all the things you can get from that. I mean, when I wrote the book, I didn't know very much about smell. I do research in vision and research in hearing and how those senses get integrated. But I taught a little bit about smell, but then I started writing the book and I started reading all this literature on smell. And smell is so cool. You're going to learn things that you're going to be absolutely amazing. So yes, you can scent track, but when you use two nostrils, but something about who wore a t-shirt, something about an individual's scent signature. And in addition, you'll learn that you can smell when a woman is fertile. She's in her fertile part of the cycle. Something about the genetic compatibility with another person, and something about their genetic health, which is reflected not only in how they smell, but in how symmetrical their body appears to be. What? That's all on smell? Yeah, you'll learn about this. It's some really interesting research. And then, one of the things you probably know about smell is smell seems to be associated with memories that we have that are more emotional. We'll learn about how exactly that works, how scent can add emotion to those memories. So we have that first chapter on smell, then we'll go to a second chapter on smell and talk about all the smell that we're doing, all the processing of scents that we're doing unconsciously. So when you walked into the room you're in now, when I walked into my kitchen today, I smelled things, probably a little bit of last night's dinner was lingering in the air. I made my breakfast, I smelled the coffee, that sort of thing. But you're probably very aware of this. After you smell those things, even if you're in the same environment, you basically lose attention to those things, right? You're no longer aware of those smells. Maybe you can go up to the coffee maker and smell it again, but that the smell's been there the entire time. It's just, you become what's called nose blind to that, right? And it's fine, that you're no longer attending to it, you no longer notice it, right? But your brain is continually processing, analyzing those smells, even though you're not consciously aware of it. And we're going to talk about tons of research about unconscious smell. Okay. And again, I think you'll find this stuff really interesting. We'll talk about experiments that have to do with very subtle changes in behavior. If there's a cleaning smell that's below your level of awareness, it's too light to be consciously aware of, but it is present. It will show it can do subtle things like maybe make you clean a tiny bit more. Being presented the smell of somebody who is scared, like has just gotten off a roller coaster, okay? Being unaware that you're presented that smell can have very subtle influences on how jumpy you are and how nervous you are. Again, these are very subtle effects, but effects that can be measured, okay? You'll learn that you actually are able to process smells in your sleep. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but if it's in the morning and I'm still dreaming, if my wife makes coffee, I might have a dream that involves coffee, and I'll wake up and find out that real smell was there. Your brain is analyzing smells even when you're sleeping. And you'll learn a little bit about the unconscious passage of information between people that's sometimes associated with a term we call pheromones. It's a controversial idea, human pheromones, but we'll get deep into it and see how we feel about it after we look at that research. You may know that women who are cohabitating, women who share a dorm room, will match up their menstrual cycles. Okay? It is thought, at least by some researchers, that this occurs based on unconscious scents that are passed between them, that synchronizes them, that entrains the cycles so that they match up. So we'll learn all about the use of subliminal odors, the use of smells to detect fear and danger, and then how the odor of others might affect your mood a tiny bit, and in a very, very subtle way, have a little bit of an effect over arousal. We'll see. We've got to, take that with a grain of salt, but there's some research that's, I think you'll find interesting on that type of thing. We'll then move on to taste, and we'll learn that taste is probably your most multisensory sense. And what I mean by that is very little taste comes from your tongue. I mean, that is certainly where we experience taste, right? That is certainly where you feel your experience of food is coming from. But you might know from watching cooking shows that our sense of taste comes from more than just that. A lot of your sense of taste, of course, comes from your nose, and we'll try some demonstrations of that in our discussion sections. But you also might know that it comes from sight, right? My son and wife and I just finished watching the series The Bear. You guys know that series? It's about a family who opens a restaurant, and kind of the drama and the excitement that goes around that is beautifully done. It's a great show. But a lot of what they show are various characters developing new recipes and new meals. And it's just beautifully, the food is like on your favorite cooking competition show, the food is beautifully photographed. And you know that how a food looks, how a dish looks will really influence how appealing it is. That makes sense. But what you might not know is that without being able to see, or let me turn this sound off actually. Without being able to see your food, you're not able, well, I won't say very much about this. I want it to be a surprise, but we'll find out what it's like eating in the dark. And I went to a dark restaurant, a restaurant that has no light whatsoever, that purports to allow you to taste your food more vividly, okay? And I will talk about my experience and other people's experience of what that is like, okay? Then we'll talk about research that shows not only is our experience of flavor, our experience of taste affected by vision and smell, it's also affected by hearing. So you taste what you hear, touch, and smell. Also, we'll talk about how what you expect will influence it, right? I remember watching the Bear a couple nights ago. The dessert chef comes up with a cannoli. I love cannolis. I don't know how you folks feel about them. The cannoli is an Italian dessert that has kind of a hard crust on the outside. It kind of looks like a little taco, almost a little hard-shelled taco. And in the middle is a kind of a very creamy sweet cheese. It's delicious. I mean, it's very rich, and it's just a great combination of textures. But what he comes up with, this dessert chef, is a savory thing with a caviar on it and things like that. And I just thought, if I ate that, looking at what he made, I would expect it to be sweet. And I bet if I tasted the fishy aspects of that cannoli, it would be unpleasant because I expect it to taste sweet. And there's research that absolutely suggests that's true. But what also is true, and I think you'll find this super interesting, is the more you know about a food, the more you know about something like wine, the more vivid it will taste to you, the more complexity you'll be able to pull out. And that's where we'll meet a wine master who has learned to detect the things like the vineyard, of course, the country of origin, the type of wine, even the year that the wine was bottled, based on tasting wine. Then we'll move on to taste. Then we'll move on to touch and learn 2 chapters worth of touch, where you'll end up thinking, hopefully, of touch in a very different way. That we're able to touch we're able to use touch to understand a lot more than you think. So you're going to meet an individual, Rick Joy, who lost his vision and hearing at a very young age. Okay, so he has no auditory information, he has no visual information, and he is able to communicate with people by touching their face. You may have heard of this before. Here's Helen Keller doing the same thing, touching the face here of Dwight Eisenhower, President Eisenhower. And these are two of a group of individuals who are blind and deaf who are able to understand what people are saying from touching articulators. Okay? And you'll learn that this is something that you could do with some practice, but even without the practice, you could do to a small extent. And your brain would treat that touch speech as if it's heard speech. We said before, right, that the auditory part of our brain might get affected by what we see. In this case, it can be affected by what we touch. So the hearing part of your brain is actually activated by touching the face of somebody speaking, even though you probably have never touched the face of a speaker for this purpose before. You'll learn that you can also recognize faces and you can recognize facial expressions to touch. And then we'll talk about research that has to do with being able to feel things without touching them. So let me see if I can find, yeah, this glass would be a great example, I suppose. Here I am, and what I'm doing is I'm just touching, my skin is just in contact with a very small part of this glass. Can you see this glass okay against my shirt? However, because of the way the glass is kind of pulling on my skin and also pulling on the little tendons in my finger, okay, that's telling my brain something about the entire object, even though I'm not making skin contact with that. And that's what I mean about being able to feel things without touching them. We can know something through our sense of touch about the objects we hold, even if our skin is not directly touching those characteristics of the object. Touching is very deep. And then we'll learn about using tools for the sense of touch. You know, there are many examples, certainly a blind person using a cane, but even as simple as using a spoon to mix soup that we're cooking on the stove, or using a pen or pencil to take notes like you might be doing now. Those are tools that are not only, you know, creating marks on our paper, but are telling our fingers, our hands, our muscles, just how much pressure to apply to the paper based on how we're perceiving the characteristics of that paper that we're only in contact with through the pencil as a tool. Okay? And then finally, hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about this. If not, well, it's in the book. There's some really neat examples of how, like spiders, we can determine the location of something that is in a rope web, and something about how large it is, how heavy it is. This is, of course, how spiders, if they're not using their vision, they can kind of feel the vibrations in the web to know where the flies are, and how big the flies are. We can do this to some degree too. Then we'll use touch in a separate chapter to learn something about plasticity. Okay? So we'll learn how touch changes our brain. And we'll do that through meeting a really interesting individual named John Bramlett. There he is. John lost his vision when he was, I think, around 1920. He had been, I guess, starting to lose his vision in his early teens. He had a seizure disorder. But he decided, after he completely had no light vision whatsoever, to take up painting. And he paints through touch. You're seeing him do that there in that image, and you'll learn about John's painting technique and what he has to do in order to make paintings touchable. And then we'll use him as an example of someone who's used his experience of touch, in this case, very fine grain touch, to change his brain. So his brain is actually making use of the visual parts that are no longer getting input from the eyes. It's a great example of what we call cross-sensory plasticity, right? So his visual areas of his brain, the parts back here that are largely visual, isn't getting input from the eyes, and that part's getting bored. That part of the brain's getting bored and saying, I'm happy to help out with touch, I'm happy to help out with hearing, and then helps those senses get better to compensate for not having vision. We'll learn about that again and again. So your visual brain is ready to help you touch, and it's something that you'll see that happens with you in kind of a much more kind of subtle way than in John Bramlett. You'll see how for blind individuals, this fact that touch sensitivity can improve has been used in what we call visual aids for the blind. In this case, it's a visual aid. It's a device that's designed to help the blinds navigate. This is a device that is applied to the tongue. We'll talk about why. That presents information from a camera about what's in front of a person, what's in front of a blind person. And then we'll talk about the specifics of how the brain changes. We'll talk about how with repeated touch of a certain type, okay, the brain starts going through this plasticity. And we'll learn, this will be kind of the more technical aspects of the class, where we'll learn about how neurons change, how neural connections change to kind of facilitate this expertise. We'll learn about the different types of plasticity, the short-term plasticity, the type that, if you're learning a new skill initially, how the brain changes, and then how practicing that new skill then induces what we call long-term plasticity. So, let's think about, a skill that you learned, riding a bike, I guess is the classic, right? At first, when my kids, they had to concentrate very hard. They had to kind of concentrate on balancing. They had to concentrate, on keeping the front wheel straight and pedaling at the same time and all that sort of thing. It was a very conscious thing. And then, after a little while, it becomes what we call second nature. When a skill becomes second nature, we're going from short-term plasticity to long-term plasticity, and we'll discuss exactly what's going on with your nervous system as that happens. Okay. And then we'll talk about situations where, for individuals who've lost part of their bodies, through amputation, through accidents, something like that, what happens to the brain as a result of that amputation. And we'll learn that even though plasticity is an absolutely wondrous thing, it allows us, it is the basis for us to learn new skills, even into our old age, right? Believe it or not, I'm learning new skills all the time, perceptual skills all the time. There are certain situations where plasticity can be problematic. One of them is when somebody has an amputation, they lose a hand or a leg or something like that. Their brain kind of reacts through plasticity in a very dramatic way, which can induce experiences of what we call phantom limb pain or phantom limb sensation, where people still have an uncomfortable feeling in the leg that they've had removed, even though it's not there and they're very aware it's not there. They can almost feel like it is there in a way, and they have pain there. That's the brain's kind of shock and how it goes through a plasticity change based on that type of thing. We'll learn the details of that later on in the quarter. And then we'll switch to faces. And we'll discuss how that you actually have some expertise already in faces. So we're going to go into vision, basically, is what I'm saying here. How are we doing in time? Yeah, I'm going to go through these. I'll finish these slides and then we'll take a break. I think since it's a 3-hour lecture, we'll take a break about halfway through. We'll take a 10-minute break. I'll need a break at least. So then we'll move to vision and we'll learn about face perception. And we'll learn about face perception by meeting a really interesting person who worked on a problem that you may be aware of. So you might know what this image is from. This image is from a movie called The Polar Express. Maybe you've seen it. It's usually on every year at Christmas time. I'm amazed it has the longevity it has, but I guess they run out of Christmas movies to show. I find it very creepy. And looking at that image, you might find it creepy too. You're experiencing something that's very well known in animating faces and for movies or for video games, where it's hard not to make them look creepy. Isaiah knows that this is in fact called the Uncanny Valley, and we will learn a lot about the Uncanny Valley, and we will learn about Hollywood's attempt to try to solve the problem, and how at least one individual who I interviewed was able to do it to some degree through a movie you may have seen called, I think it's called The Amazing Life of Benjamin Button, something like that, starring Brad Pitt. And he won the Academy Award for that. It's a great story. I was able to interview him a few days after they won the Academy Award for Best Special Effects on this movie by actually creating a Brad Pitt facial puppet that they convinced people was really Brad Pitt, even though it was computer animation. But the reason it's been such a hard thing to do to create computer animated faces that look real. You might know this through doing portraying Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher through the Star Wars movies, or when an actor dies, they have to do this sometimes. It's been a very difficult thing to do. The reason it's so difficult is because of your brain, because your brain is so attuned to the subtleties of faces. It picks up facial information and very, very nuanced facial information all the time. So it's hard to fake it out. It's hard to fool your brain into thinking that you're looking at a real face when it's not a real face. Because you can do tons of things with faces that you might not know of, that you can recognize faces based on not just kind of the sort of characteristics that we typically think about as being able to that we use to recognize faces, the shape of the face, the hairline, the features, but also by taking all those things out and just watching facial movement through a series of dots placed on the face, you're able to recognize your friends just based on the way their faces move. What else? We talked about this before early when it came to mirror neurons, that you use your face to perceive others' expressions. So this imitation goes on all the time, so that if it's inhibited, it makes it more difficult to perceive other people's expressions. And then we'll talk about some really provocative research about facial perception, having to do with kind of some of these deeper things we get out of faces, personality. Now, I know we were all told not to judge a book by its cover, right? Not to judge a person's, character based on how they look, right? And I think that's true. I think we shouldn't, kind of jump to assumptions if we can help it. You're going to learn, though, your brain can't help it to some degree. Your brain automatically makes judgments based on facial appearance. That can be changed, don't get me wrong, which is wonderful, right? You look at somebody, you kind of make assumptions about their personality, then you get to know them and you realize, boy, they're very different from how I assumed they would be, which is always, I think, interesting. But often the assumptions we make right off the bat can be correct. And it's a very interesting sort of phenomenon when we are correct, that we actually, there is something in the information of facial structure that might actually tell us something about personality, at least to a small degree. And then this last thing that we actually alluded to before, based on somebody's facial symmetry, whether the left side of their face is, symmetric with the right side of their face, and whether they have youthful sort of appearances, whether we know something about the reproductive potential of a face, whether this is a face where if we were to have offspring with the person who owns that face, whether we would have healthy offspring. And this is something that we know occurs in the animal world. It seems to occur in subtle ways with human faces as well. Then we'll move to the second chapter on on visual perception, and that's the one where we'll be talking about imitating and how we're able to perceive based on imitation, able to perceive better based on imitation. And we'll talk about imitation in a lot of different ways. One of my favorites has to do with magic. Okay, I'm an amateur magician. I'll try to do some little magic for you when we talk about this stuff, just to make it fun in the class. But one thing magicians absolutely do is take advantage of the fact that your brain is imitating what you're seeing the magician do. And let me just show you a silly little example of that. Okay, you'll see this person throw up the ball. Ta-da! Okay, so it's the dumbest experiment, it's the dumbest magic trick in the world. I agree. But at least, when you show it to people and they're not expecting a magic trick necessarily, and they're seeing that on a big screen, and you ask them what happened to the ball, people will say, oh, I guess he threw it up and there was somebody above the screen catching it, or it was a disappearing ball, it was collapsible and it just kind of disappeared in thin air. Okay, people have trouble figuring out what happened. If, on the other hand, you show them this version, okay, you know where the ball is now. You probably knew where the ball was before, but probably you would agree that that second version is a much less impressive magic trick. Because the difference between the second version and the first version is, for the first version, he was throwing up the ball and watching the ball rise, including that last throw, where he kept the ball in his hand, right? And the ball, his gaze, where he was looking, continued up as if the ball was continuing up. In the second version, he didn't do that. He threw the ball up once, twice, and the third time kept it in his hand and watched his hand. What your brain did is imitated where he was looking. Your attention was guided by where his eyes were gazing, the direction of his eyes. That's why the second version didn't work as well as the first version. This is something magicians know really well. So they're looking at this hand, knowing that even if you're not literally moving your eyes to that position, your brain's attention does go to that position, so they can do something sneaky with the hand you're now looking at. Misdirection, okay? And that gaze imitation, okay, is something that our brains are programmed to do, and the magicians take wonderful advantage. I'll show you some glorious examples of really good magicians doing this. It's just tremendous. So this imitation of gaze is going to help you perceive. And then we'll talk about all the other types of imitations we do, imitations of speech inflections, imitations of body language, all these cool things. And again, we're talking about the type of imitation that's subtle, that's typically not noticed, not the type that my sons used to do to each other to drive each other nuts in the car, right? But this imitation helps you with our interactions. It helps us with our ability to perceive each other better. It helps us share our action and perception, including being able to synchronize each other's motions. And we'll go into these details when we discuss this chapter. Then the last two chapters of the book, the last two lectures we'll be talking about, are going to be on multisensory perception, including one of my favorite examples, because we study this in my laboratory, lip reading. Now, this is not something we typically think of ourselves as being able to do, those of us that are hearing, right? You can imagine watching a newscaster or something like that, where you can see a person's face clearly and then turning down the sound and trying to understand what they're saying. Yeah, maybe you get a few words every now and then, or if you can understand the topic, that would help a little bit. All right. However, maybe you're a little bit more of the fact that you do some lip reading all the time when we're in noisy environments. I know for me, I became very aware of this during the epidemic when we were all wearing masks. And boy, I guess COVID's starting to raise its ugly head again a little bit. I've got some friends who have it now that they've been traveling. I went to Trader Joe's yesterday and I saw a lot more people wearing masks, which I think is probably a good idea, since there's a lot more traveling. Fortunately, everyone I know who's gotten sick has recovered quickly and they're doing well. But I think we might be wearing masks again a little bit for part of the summer. I became so aware of my lip reading during that period when we were all wearing masks, especially in, restaurants, right? So the waiters would come up, or waitresses would come up and with a mask on, tell us the specials. And I found it very difficult to determine to hear them. And yeah, a mask does quiet the voice a tiny bit, but negligibly. In fact, if they wore this type of mask, right, there's a good chance that we'd be able to understand them better. And we know this very, very well. We know this very, very well, that all of us actually watch a face to help us understand what a person is saying in noisy environments, okay, in a restaurant situation. Maybe you did notice this when people were wearing masks, that you didn't understand them quite as well. Yeah, might have a little to do with sound, but it mostly had to do with not seeing their face. So we use visual speech whenever it's available. Not only that, but visual speech will automatically integrate with heard speech. And let me go ahead and make sure that you can hear this demonstration. You might know this demonstration. If not, it'll be fun. You're going to see a lower half of a face now. Just this person is going to be saying very simple syllables, and I want you to tell me what syllables you hear.
Ba. 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 Ba.
Okay, just type out some of the syllables you heard, this couple, in the chat, if you wouldn't mind. This couple, what'd you hear? Ba, da, yeah, va, da. A lot of people heard va, wa, ba, va. You heard a bunch, right? I think most people hear ba, va, da, da, right? That's what most people hear. When you heard ma, that's perfectly fine. Now what I'd like you to do is I'm going to play the exact same video again, and I want you to look away and tell me what you heard.
Ba. 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 Ba.
Now open your eyes.
Ba.
And listen to it again.
Ba. Ba. Ba.
Oop, a little slow. Hopefully, if the video worked for you, okay, when you were looking away, you heard the same syllable over and over again. Ba, in this case, I believe it is. And that is exactly what your ears are getting in all of this, is the same syllable over and over again. But if the synchrony works, right, when you're looking at the face, what you see is overriding what you're hearing. It's sometimes combining, it's sometimes actually, kind of overriding what you're hearing. And that happens to your brain automatically. One version or another this works for everybody. And this is an amazing effect, right? This is something my lab has studied and other labs have studied because it seemed so compelling. Hopefully the synchrony was okay. The video wasn't choppy and it worked on most of you. If not, I can link a nice example for you that you can watch later on. It's a very well-known effect and something we'll be talking about. And it nicely shows that your senses integrate, even if we're not trying to get them to integrate, and they integrate to the point where you believe you're hearing something that you're actually seeing. In fact, what's going on there is the visual information is affecting your auditory brain. And the visual information you're getting here, this lip-read information, which we never thought we'd use before, absolutely is influencing your auditory brain areas as if you're hearing what you're saying. Okay? We'll talk a lot about all this information you can get from seeing a face speak, including the fact that you can recognize people based on seeing how they speak, even when all the other, skin information and feature information is taken away. You can recognize your friends based on their style of speaking. Then we'll move to our last chapter, which is another chapter on multisensory perception, and talk about all the examples of how our senses work together. And this is something that amusement park ride designers know. If you've been to Universal Studios recently, you might know that, in fact, they many of the new rides they design are these motion simulator rides. Right, so these are situations where the visual information they're presenting you, like a roller coaster, like there's a Simpsons ride, I believe that's still there, that takes you through a roller coaster. It makes you feel like you're moving, even though your body isn't moving very much. We'll learn that those little cars that you sit in when you're in these motion simulator rides move maybe 3 feet in each direction, up and down, but you have this very, very strong experience of actually falling or shifting a lot more than your body is actually shifting. There's research on this to show that visual information has a very strong influence on how this type of thing works. So we'll learn that even something as simple as standing still and staring out in front of you, that ability to maintain your posture is influenced by what you're seeing and what you're hearing. So we'll talk about that by learning something from these motion simulator ride designers. And then we'll talk about other aspects of multisensory perception where a characteristic of somebody, for example, their attractiveness, can be based on how they smell, how they sound, and of course how they look, which is how we normally are able to judge somebody's attractiveness. See that people that are judged visually attractive typically are judged independently to be vocally attractive, and are judged independently to be to have an attractive smell. So nature's telling you, yeah, there's an attractive person that might have very good genetic health, which would be a good person to have healthy offspring work with. Okay? We'll learn then about how the brain, as I said, is designed around multisensory input, and that fact will allow us to have this compensation that occurs across senses. So even, we've talked already about a couple of blind individuals and blind deaf individuals who've learned to kind of fine tune their other senses to help compensate for that loss. We'll learn that this happens even in much more subtle and brief ways. So, for example, here I am, Rosenblum the nerd, me, who wears glasses because I'm nearsighted. Well, I got news for you. Because I wear glasses, not contacts, I wear glasses, and I am nearsighted. I don't have the visual periphery, okay? For those of us that wear glasses, we know this. This is not corrected. The vision that's corrected is in front of me when you wear glasses. This is not corrected. That loss, that distortion in vision actually subtly boosts my ability to attend to sounds on the side. So even my vision isn't terrible. I probably could drive without my glasses. It's not terrible. If you see me driving without my glasses, stay away. But I can get around. Certainly, I go to the beach and take off my glasses. I'm fine. But that minor decrement in my peripheral vision that's not corrected because I wear glasses instead of contacts, that allows some fine tuning in my hearing, even though it's a minor decrement. Okay, we'll learn about that. So just as a summary, you're perceiving much more than you realize. We'll call these implicit perceptual abilities. You share some of these skills with animals. We'll talk about this when we get back about bats. Most of these skills can be enhanced, and you'll learn that from perceptual experts who are, for say, have lost a sense, or for professional reasons have learned to fine tune a sense, and that all of these people you'll be meeting and stories you'll be hearing are wonderful for portraying these important concepts in modern perceptual and brain science having to do with neuroplasticity, nervous systems, and multisensory primacy. So let me take a little break here, see if there's any questions. Screen share. Hold on a second. So we still shoot. Okay. Okay. Hopefully you're seeing me, just not the slide. I don't know. It doesn't make a difference. Anyone have any questions? Any questions right now? It can be questions about the test or anything. Okay, no problem. Let's take a 10-minute break. So it's 10:38. Come back at 10:48 or so, and we'll continue. Will these slides be uploaded to Canvas? Yeah, great question, Maria. They already are. They should be accessible on Canvas. Under modules, I believe, you should be able to find them. Okay. There will be some changes in the slides as we go through and I add things, but not a whole lot. So these can be really useful for you to take notes on if you wanted to. I believe they're up there in PDF format. Okay, great. I'll see you in 10 minutes. And if you have questions then, that would be another good time to ask.